We've had Dr. Terry Paulson at this conference before, and every time we've had Terry, we get raving reviews. Most of you know Terry or heard of Terry, but let me go through a little brief introduction before I ask Terry to come up and make his talk this morning. Dr. Terry Paulson is a PhD psychologist and a leading authority on leveraging optimism to make change work. He's an award-winning professional speaker with over 30 years' experience in inspiring audience, including organizations such as Amgen, Boston Scientific, Kaiser, Starbucks, 3M, significant companies in this country. He's past president of both the National Speakers Association and the Global Speakers Federation. Dr. Paulson's been inducted into the NSA's CPAE Speaker Hall of Fame. He joins members of that group such as Norman Vincent Peale, Ronald Reagan, and Colin Powell. That's a pretty exclusive little group of people to be part of. He's the author of 10 books, including The Optimism Advantage, and I will let you know that those books are available for sale over at the table in the back if you'd like to take a look at them before you leave. The other books he has, Leadership Truths, One Story at a Time, Making Humor Work, Favorite Family Lectures, and I'm a manager, so I think he wrote this for me, is They Shoot Managers, Don't They? He wrote that book, so I've read that book, and it does apply to us managers. Terry's tasteful humor and down-to-earth style have earned him deserved reputation as one of the nation's best keynote speakers. Join me in welcoming the man Business Digest called the Will Rogers of management consultants. Dr. Terry Paulson, he's going to speak on claiming your optimism advantage. Terry Paulson.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stay down here with you. First of all, I heard the laughter where They Shoot Managers, Don't They? That was my first book. And you talk about entrepreneurs. I started right out of graduate school. I felt I was already used to poverty. So I felt it was a great time to start my own company and got involved. But the first book I wrote was this book, and I was in Denny's going over the galley proofs. It's the last chance you have to really change the book. And the waitress came up to me and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, this is my first book. And it's my last chance to change it." She said, "Well, I bet that's exciting." And she said, "What's the title?" And I said, "They Shoot Managers, Don't They?" And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "I like it." Not more than 10 minutes later, in front of all the patrons, her boss came out from the back and started yelling at her in front of all the patrons. And everybody looked away. It was an awkward moment, but as soon as he left, she came over to my table and she grabbed the book and she said, "Is it a how-to book?" And I said, "Not that kind." I think you will enjoy this opening because I think it's a good opening for what I think will be some provocative windows into our economy and what's happening. But ultimately, the attitude each one of us bring to change, to any economic endeavor, there's always questions. As I was wandering around the room, well, what's your experience now? What's happening now? How many we take reads from each other. And the optimism we bring to the party has a lot to do with whether or not the economy does well, whether we do well. I can't control other people's economy, but I can do a whole heck of a lot for my own. And each individual business has to look at what changes they need to make and how they need to deal with it. Change has always been with us. I love to show some slides on this. This is a 1930 stewardess manual. Keep the clock and altimeter wound up. How about this one? Warn the passengers against throwing cigars and cigarettes out the window. Low-flying planes. This is my favorite. Keep an eye on passengers when they go to the lavatory to make sure they don't mistakenly go out the emergency exit. People were not used to flying. That must have happened for them to put it into the book. A real challenge. And healthcare, costs have changed. This is my actual bill when I was born in Panama City, Florida. 6 days at $6 a day, 5 days, $6 a day, $30. They put me in the laundry and called it a nursery. This upsets me. Total bill, $96, $50 went to the medical. I got to go back and actually present to the hospital that I was born in, and they had forgotten me. Looked quite different. But when I went in, I showed them the bill, and I said, "Now I understand why you're a nursing home. You weren't charging enough, you know." I could actually be like salmon. I'm coming home to die, you know. Coming across the country, get back to Florida. Change has always been with us. In fact, the opening line of A Road Less Traveled, M. Scott Peck, I loved it. He said, life is difficult. How many agree? Life, we have this illusion that things will be linearly always better. And history shows, maturity shows, you're going to go through ups and downs in your life. How do I still do well in down times and capitalize on the good times? I mean, that's what we work on. Ultimately, we will always have both of those, and life teaches us that we take advantage of it. So we come to these meetings trying to get perspectives of where are we now, and how do we take advantage of that opportunity as best we can. One of the things that interferes sometimes and adds to our pessimism, recent study by George Washington University, the evening news was monitored for 100 nights. The research found 6,500 negative news items, only 370 positive news items. The conclusion is that we are grossly overinformed about catastrophes we can do little or nothing about. That impacts us. We've got the Star here, and I write columns. Some of you may have read my columns for the Star. One of the things that is difficult, the paper still has to fill itself every day, irrespective of what's happened that day. They still have to put a paper out. It used to be, we lived in a country where you didn't have national feeds or international feeds as promptly. You didn't get pictures as effectively. So most of the pictures and information was local. You know, if Martha fell in the ditch, they had a picture of the ditch. If she was at the hospital, they would show church bringing casseroles to their home, variety of things, because the problems that we viewed every day were problems we could do something about. Now we live in a world that any disaster is brought to your doorstep within 2 minutes. How many of you find, and you're inundated for approximately 2 weeks? We spend a lot of time awfulizing. How many? We sit in front of the television and go, God, it's awful. That is awful, awful. Let's roll it back and be awful again. I mean, what ends up happening is, in a very brief period of time, we are run into a world where we are constantly up against things we can do nothing about. I really can't change what's happening there. I wish somebody could. So we are minimizing our ability to do things. It's one of the things psychologically that creates the difficulty we have of being assertive, of starting new businesses, because we're afraid I can't do it. And that's one of the challenges we face. Nobody's going to be perfect. I love this one. Pope John the 23rd, it often happens that I wake at night and begin to think about a serious problem and decide I must tell the Pope about it. Then I wake up completely, remember that I am the Pope. I don't care how much information you have and where you are. We don't have all the answers. And ultimately, those answers change as a function of what's going on. So we have, how many of you have heard of the imposter phenomenon? Have you heard of that? The book was written, it was not a big seller. No one wanted to be seen reading it. But the research shows, studies done in San Francisco, Seattle, and Boston, 70 to 80% of American professionals have imposter feelings. They're not imposters. People would rate their performance as effective. But inside, they say to themselves, if anybody found out how much I don't know about what I'm doing, I would be in deep trouble. So at least I better dress for success. I should look good. I mean, you know, so what ends up happening is we put ourselves in a position where our public image is very different from our private, and we search for information that allows us to raise up. We will never have all the answers. That's why collectively we have more power. That's why we come together for events like this, because I get different perspective, different windows, and it allows me to have more confidence in that which we're trying to sell and serve and work with people. It's stressful. I'm sorry you had a rough day at the office, but you have the wrong house. I think this woman is really nice. I don't know how he got in there, but you see, I think psychologists, in a way, we contribute to the problem because we somehow imply that stress is a negative thing. How many of you value a day that's busy, that you get a chance to take a lot of things that come, calls that come in? The worst days are the days you're sitting there going, well, gee, another minute's gone by. I mean, you know, give me a break. I would rather have demands placed upon me, as long as they're constructive demands, and I'm moving in a direction where I allow myself to build my business, serve the people that I'm working with, and if I have that experience, that's a good day. So my responsibility is not to eliminate my stress, but focus it. How do I spend my time thinking about the things that I actually can do something about so that I can contribute to this economy. I love the fact that you're talking about entrepreneurs, because ultimately a lot of the really business and job growth in any country, when it's doing well, is the small businesses that are booming and beginning to take off, because that's where you get a lot of the hires. So it's our responsibility to build that and encourage it. Wall Street is predicated on optimism. The very act of raising capital and making investments are based on the simple belief that tomorrow will be better. That's what makes economic growth and opportunity possible. One of the things that I think is contributing right now to our economic position is the fact that the world is not particularly doing too well. And if you're thinking about where you're going to put money, America seems to consistently be the place that it's a safe haven for what's happening. And so we contribute to that reality for the world. And so we are no longer just an individual economy. We are a function of a global economy. I wrote a column in the Star, and somebody picked it up in Poland. And I had talked about economic opportunity and starting small business or something, and the guy wrote back, he said, that is impossible here. And I said, it isn't impossible anywhere in the world now. You can start a business and your company can be the world. He said, well, I can't do that. And I wrote back again, and I said, look, if you have a skill, go to elance.com, lurk around for a while, find out what your skill is going for, put together a package, provide it internationally, and people will contract with you all around the world. One of the books I did, I have my cover done in India. I just looked at all the covers that were done, and I made the choice, and I got a good deal on getting it done. We live in a world, that guy in Poland now has a company. Because he began to realize, if I have a value-add proposition and I find a way to do it, the vehicles that are out there in the world today are very different. How many agree? How people get information and how people do business has changed. So in response to that, we've got to be open to that change. I like to bring a political perspective, and this is not to say that there's any one response that is appropriate, but how many of you agree when a liberal arm within the country starts to move too far in one direction, there's a natural tendency for the activists within the other party to become far more active? When they talk about what is perceived as noble, it is the critic. Well, the critics become more active when somebody goes too far one way. But if the other side begins to think they control and it's going to be linear, it comes back and forth. We tend to have a tension that's built in to America. And we can disagree without having somebody kill us. This is good. So in response to this, Michael Medved shared this at one point. And I thought it was an interesting observation because we're in the midst of this now. The presidential wing, the executive wing controlled by the Democrats, Republicans in control of Congress. We're early on in that phase. Official U.S. government figures show that the two presidents each experienced decisive turning points that shifted the fiscal fate of the nation when voters in midterm elections rejected the party in power. In Clinton's case, the Republican Revolution of 1994 saved his floundering presidency and brought about his reputation for savvy financial management. For George Bush, the 206 triumph of Pelosi's Democrats, based largely on the Iraq War disillusionment, led straight to disaster, turning a president with a solid economic record into a symbol of economic collapse. Here's some of the data on that. Average unemployment went from 6.5% to an average of 4.77%. The federal deficit average went from 3.35% of GDP to an average of less than zero when the surpluses of 1998 and 2001. The Pelosi collapse, average unemployment went from 5.29 to 6.57. The federal deficit average went from 1.91 to 4.74 in the next 2 years. We certainly have seen that average get even higher recently. Now the question becomes, in Clinton's case, when Gingrich run, he would come on that next day and he said, "The world has spoken. I'm moving to the front of the line." And he worked together to try and make something happen. We live in a world which requires us to have a certain amount of consensus. Politics affects economics. So it's one of the things that we have to look at. What's going to be happening in the midst of now a tension within our government? We've got an election coming up. That can be a factor. Then we have to look at attitude. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. How many of you have read Man's Search for Meaning? If you haven't, it's a book, age-old book. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust experience. He was a psychoanalyst. And when he went through that experience, he said, I gave up all my analytical theories because it didn't have any relevance to what was happening in real life. And he said, but I observed something. I used my observation skills. Some people in the midst of the worst of times, in the midst of the Holocaust experience, up close and personal, maintained a positive attitude. And he studied it. He said, number one, they had a service mentality. Even though they were suffering along with everybody else, what they would do is if they had food, they would give some of it to somebody who needed more of it. Faith perspective was important. Well, they didn't identify which particular faith, but he found those individuals who had faith, very easy for them to maintain and continue to manage themselves in the midst of that experience. He called humor the weapon of the soul. Hard to think you could find humor in the midst of a concentration camp. But what they found is they were literally assigned every single day they had to find something that was funny and bring it at night, and that was their therapy before they went to sleep at night. As a result of that, we begin to realize something. Attitude is not a function of what happens to you. That's happiness. Anything you bring in the form of optimism is a function of what you bring to an event and how you view it, how you talk to yourself about things that happen. And the responsibility, America used to be known primarily as a very optimistic country. People believed that they could make something happen. It impacted our small business growth, our entrepreneurial initiative. Oh, I want to make it happen. I want to report to myself. So in response to that, cultivating that is one of the things we do in communicating to other people. I want people to believe that through effort, clear focus, a positive value proposition, they can be successful. And when we communicate that, people are less likely to be dependent and more likely to be independent. And when they are successful, they're more likely to give back to the community. How many of you find some of the most successful people in this world are people who give a whole heck of a lot back to the community that is involved? And so it's our responsibility to build on that. We have a nation that has a constant need to be entertained, a short attention span, and an inability to look at anything in depth. We are inundated with information. How many of you find it's just hard to even keep up with email, all the different ways people can reach you? We spend more of our time going, delete, 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 delete. So what ends up happening is people are left with impressions as opposed to doing their due diligence. One of the challenges we have is to really help people focus on what are your objectives? How can I help you with doing the due diligence that allows us to make sure you're going to be more likely to be successful? And in the midst of that, do things in a way that will allow you to do it in a profitable, cost-effective manner. Learned optimism and positive psychology. Learned helplessness. Many give way to victim thinking in the depression of our age. Learned helplessness. Nothing I do will make any difference in what happens to me, so I might as well wait till they do it to me. Then I can sue them. So what ends up happening is we have created increasingly a sign of dependence. I talked to a physician. I'm involved right now in working with a program called Circles, and it's a program that's designed to help people on the edge of poverty. They have homes now. They are in apartments, but they can't break the chain. Because as soon as they make more money, then all of a sudden they drop off some dependent program, and they're actually punished for being successful. I was talking to a physician, and he said he had a woman come into a free clinic, and she just said her daughter was with her, and her social worker came in, and she said, "That's my social worker. Someday you'll grow up and have one too." And he said, the physician said, I felt like I wanted to strangle her. I wanted her to know, is that your hope you have? You see, I believe part of the thing, and one of the reasons I love talking to this group, you're the hope merchants out there. You're the people who give people viable ways in order for them to be successful, to fund their dreams and to be able to make that happen. And if you get in touch with that mission, it's exciting, and at the same time, our responsibility. And our job is, if we ever get to the point where there are too many people who no longer believe that it is possible to be successful, we have a problem, major problem. So we try and build on it. Life inflicts the same setbacks and tragedies on the optimist as on the pessimist, but the optimist weathers them better. The optimist bounces back from defeat, and with his life somewhat poor, he picks up and starts again. The pessimist gives up and falls into depression. Because of his resilience, the optimist achieves more at work, at school, and on the playing field. The optimist has a better physical health and may even live longer. Now, let's talk about what optimism is. It is not Pollyanna thinking. It isn't positive thinking on steroids. You know what they found in the research? Optimism comes from a track record of overcoming obstacles. The more obstacles you have overcome, the more likely it is you believe that you will do it again. So in function of that, our job, it changes your job as a parent. Your job as a parent is to make your life difficult for the kids. Really, it is, or they'll never leave. I mean, this is a very key thing. They keep coming back. Now, and here's why. Somewhere along the lines, we thought we were hurting their psyche by letting them lose. So you get an 8th place trophy when there's only 8 teams. All right, and in reality, what we need is to allow people to experience some disappointment. Disappointment is a part of life. My son came to me and said, "Are you going to buy me a car?" "No." He said, "Everybody gets a car." I said, "I don't think so. And even if it was true, it'll be everybody minus one." He said, "How am I going to get a car?" I said, "I only know 4 ways." They said, "Illegal. Start your own company." The people who've started bands, or people who've done, now online, I mean, the kids that are 17, 16 started companies online. They're billionaires. You don't like that? Create something the entrepreneur needs. They'll sell it. Service or a product. Get into sales. You get a commission on the basis of what you sell. It drives our economy. And if none of these excite you, find the gift God's given you, find a way to get up in the morning and enjoy what you do and get paid for it. And then here's your secret. No matter how much money you make, Sean, save some of it so you don't come to your dad and want me to buy you a car. No. I disappointed him. He was disappointed for months. He came back. He said 3 months later, "I know how I'm going to make my money." So what are you going to do? He says, "I'm going to write a book." "You've written books?" I said, "Oh, yeah." Well, I felt like saying it'd be nice if you start with a term paper, but I knew that was a downer. So I said, "Okay, what's your book?" He said, "Favorite Family Lectures." You've lectured me so many times, and some of them are funny, so I think I could sell that. I'm going to talk to all the kids at school, get the best lectures, put them in a book, because parents are working too hard. They don't have time to lecture. In this way, when they send them to the room, they just give them the book and go read 42, and it would be quicker. The kids would like it, and I said, "That'll probably sell." Took us 3 years. We ended up working together on that book, and he sold 10,000 copies of a self-published book, and he got a car. Now here's the beauty of it. Life does not promise that the next year an economy will be easy. It just means those who are positioned effectively, they are persistent in providing value, have a chance to be successful in this country. We are blessed to be here. How many of you, every once in a while, just think, "I'm so lucky to be here"? The myth: optimists are amiable, probably IQ challenged Pollyannas, shield themselves from bad signs, and aren't prepared when trouble strikes. Optimistic people are more willing than pessimists to read bad news about their health habits, more willing to learn about their failures on tests. They also remember bad news longer than pessimists do. Far from being unrealistic Pollyannas, optimists give up sooner than pessimists when presented with unsolvable problems. Here's what I want you to understand about that. Optimists are realists. Why? Because they have a track record of overcoming obstacles. They want to know the problem so they can deal with it. If you're an optimist and you find out you have cancer, it hits you like it hits anybody. But then they go home, they look at Google, they look at all the different sources, and they come back and say, "I realize the data indicates that only 5% survive. I want to be one of those. What do I do to make it more likely I am?" Our opportunities, irrespective of what you hear today, are a function of what you do to make it more likely you are successful. So I'm always asking myself, instead of doing nothing, do something. Stay active. Appreciate the long-term economic strength of America in this country. This was in Fast Company. Optimism is over. The layouts, the buyouts, the bankruptcies of the past year are starting to look like the good old days. Business sucks to such a degree that unbridled optimism, the kind of wild, harebrained zest to rule the world, is now just decide that your meds aren't working. Any idea when that was written? You could pick a lot of different times. 2001, it was actually a November editorial, 2001, right after 9/11, when the economy was hit so strongly, right after the attack on our very system, and yet we rebounded. Rebounds occur. The question is how long it will take, how healthy the economic recovery will be. There will also be downturns. We know that will occur. So ultimately, our job it's a question of timing, it's a question of those kinds of issues and looking at it. Get down before you hurt yourself. You will always have the pits people of the world. They'll ask you, "How's it going?" "Oh, it's a pit. Place is the pits. The job's the pits. You're the pits." 15 minutes with a highly negative person can take the motivation of an entire team down. How many of you have seen that happen? My responsibility is, irrespective of what hands I'm dealt, you play a poor hand well, right? I continue to look at what's within my capacity to do. How do I deal with it? We have a lot of people talking about the gap between the rich and the poor. How many of you hear that one constantly? They're talking about the gap between the rich and the poor. They make the assumption that the poor are always poor and the rich are always rich. And yet longitudinal, these are the bootstrap studies out of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. University of Michigan has also done this, but I want to give you this because it's powerful. The University of Michigan Panel Survey of Income Dynamics tracks the income of 3,725 individuals for the 17 years from 1975 to 1991. Now, these are all individuals that the time at the start of their study were poor, all right? They were poor in terms of the income that they were making. Now, what do we know about that? Some of those people were between jobs. They had no income, but at the same time, they were there. Now, here's what happened. Over 80% of this original poor segment made it to the middle class or better, the top 60% of the population. Indeed, 29% of them reached the top quintile. That's the top 20%. They were poor. Within 17 years, they made it to the top quintile. Indeed, 29% of them reached the top quintile. To generalize from this study, over several decades, only 1 out of 20 poor Americans will stay poor, while 13 will become middle class and 6 will become rich. Upward mobility is an ongoing process that gathers momentum with time. The message is clear. This is a land of opportunity, and if you're not getting yours, don't complain, go to school. Here's another study. This was a more recent study, 2007 Treasury study. Those with very high incomes in 1996, the top 1% had their incomes halved by 2005. They were not getting ahead at the expense of others. Those in the top 20% increased 10%. Those originally in the bottom 20% saw a 91% increase in income. Missed by statisticians because of such increases move people out of the lowest 20%. There is no permanent overclass. Here's the interesting thing. How many of you agree? Income can vary at the higher levels. A lot of the wealthiest, they're not making income. It's wealth that is allowing their money to work for them as opposed to having income that is generating that. So our ability to realize we live in a world where we need to let people know the American dream still works. Because ultimately, if we do not do that, we don't get the generated work that allows our economy to be that much more effective. So that's part of the challenge we all face, to believe in people. Dispute catastrophic thoughts by checking fears against the facts. Martin Seligman, optimism can be learned. We teach people a concept called disputing. This involves recognizing that one often has catastrophic thoughts, feelings that everything is wrong and nothing's going to change. We teach people to think about these thoughts as if they were being said by some external person whose mission in life is to make them miserable. Then we have them dispute those thoughts, and that's the heart of the optimism technique. How many of you agree? You say things to yourself you would not say to another human being. How many of you are worse on yourself than any other person? You've lost sleep over some of the things you've done. You lay awake at night, I can't believe I did. One guy said it's like we have a filer in the back of our brain. Every time you call yourself a name, he goes back to check the evidence. As soon as you say stupid, he goes, wait a minute, boss, let me go to your stupid file. And, oh, you are. Early on, you were just emerging stupid, but you have taken it to an entirely new level. We're going to put this near the front of the file so that if you want to feel bad, you can feel bad actually anytime you want to. What do you say to yourself when things are going well? Very little. Bad beats good. When was the last time you laid awake at night going, what a day? I can't sleep. I was good. I was good. So if you're internally far more critical, if we're more aware of the problem, it's very hard to motivate ourselves in the midst of that. That's the challenge we face. Invest your worry time in due diligence and constructive actions. Seek out the economic facts and trends that indicate both threats and opportunities. You may not be able to impact the economy, but you can improve your economy. I'm always thinking, in fact, the more of us that do that, the more likely it is that America does better. I mean, that's what it is. It's collectively, we're building on this, and it's an opportunity. I have a bias towards action. Let's see something happen now. You can break that big plan into small steps and take the first step right away. Action. Norman Vincent Peale, action is a great restorer and builder of confidence. Inaction is not only a result, but the cause of fear. Perhaps the action you take will be successful. Perhaps different action or adjustments will have to follow. But any action is better than no action at all. I used to work with people in therapy, and ages ago, and they would say, well, I have to get my head together. I have to think about this. I'm not sure I want to do that. And they would argue with themselves forever on an action. And I would have fun because I just can't help myself. And they would say, I just need to get my head together. I said, don't go in there. I see what's in there. Oh, gee, you are worse on yourself than anybody I've ever met. No, you could have an enemy treat you better. And they would start laughing, and we'd work on what were you saying to yourself in the midst of this, because the real challenge is move. Once you move, you got a chance to catch yourself being effective, make adjustments. You're going to make mistakes. How many agree? Mistakes are a part of life. The quicker you learn, the better you're back on target, and you continue to move. That's how we build. Harvey, sometimes I think you're too cautious about life. The ultimate in earthquake preparedness. I mean, we are ready. How about this one? Don't get engrossed over things which you have no control, because that will adversely affect the things you do have control over. Who is the only person you control? Yourself, and even that's in question on Mondays. Now, once you understand that that's true, I focus on every single day what's the best use of my time right now to make it more likely I am going to contribute to positive outcomes on the basis of my company, my career, what I'm doing. Performance plus luck equals results. How many of you agree? Luck has a bearing on life. You can't plan for it. How about this one? Even good luck. You better get a good grip on that net, Herman. This baby is coming through here. What do we control? These are the three things. Am I positioned effectively? You're going to hear Bill and Mark talk about how do we position ourselves in the midst of the challenges we face right now to make it more likely that we can take advantage of trends and things that are happening. Am I doing my job effectively in the midst of that? And then once I've done that well, I got to persist again and do it differently. I reposition, because the real tendency is to continue to do it the way we've always done it. Ron talked earlier that it's not our Father's economy. It's not our Father's world. People are changing careers constantly. So as a result of that, we have to be open and flexible in the midst of it. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. Wayne Gretzky. I heard him on an interview, and I loved his comment. He gave credit to an early coach. Pulled him aside after a frustrating game and said, I want you to know something. You outskated everybody else out there in the ice, but you did not take a single shot on net. Miss some tomorrow night. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. One of our responsibilities is to not wait until things are totally clear, but to be part of the risk that is involved. Wise, due diligent risk to help our economy move forward. I don't wait until everybody does it for me. What am I going to do to contribute to that? I'd love to have this region be part of what contributes to the success of California, of the United States, of the world, and that's what we try and build on. Lifelong learner. You know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You become an old dog when you stop doing new tricks. That's my basic theory. As long as I continue to live, I just, when I speak to teenagers, I just look at them and I laugh. I says, I am a teenager with old skin. You know, and I haven't lost it, right? How many of you want to have the adventure of knowing that you can continue and you look in the mirror, what happened? How about this one? There's an alarming increase in the number of things I know nothing about. How many have been listening to somebody sometime and you go, what the heck are they even talking about? I was listening to Bill last night. We had a dinner with some of the speakers and sponsors. Great experience. But Bill is, and I can't wait to hear it again because he's going to share some of this, but I was going, what did he just say? Right, you got to listen really intently and focus. And you know what we do? We don't say anything. We don't raise our hand. What we do is we look at somebody who's taking notes. How many of you, they're taking notes. So you follow them to the restroom where the most significant meetings occur, and you say, what was that guy talking about? Well, I don't know. Well, you were taking notes. Well, it was my grocery list. Had to use the time. I had no idea what else to do. How many of you agree part of our job is being able to ask questions so we get the answers we need? You are not an expert until you've been engaged. You're not a person that we've got to have give and take. And it allows us to go deeper when we do. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find it. You must right size and right skill. We got too many people holding on to people that aren't doing anything. Instead of challenging people, I've got to be saying, if we are not adding value, what are you doing here? You aren't even liking your job. Our responsibility is to make sure we build on it. The illiterate of the future are not those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Which is the hardest? Unlearn. I got to let go of what I look good doing and I know how to do without even thinking about it and move into an area I have no idea what I'm doing. So you can take a note here and then you go back, and because you're here, you have more on your desk because you've been here. And when you got to do it fast, which way do we do it? The old way or the new way? Oh, get out of my way. I got to get it done. The biggest challenge you will have is managing you. What do I do to get me out of my comfort zone so I don't do it exactly the same way? How do I get comfortable with the fact that I will make a few mistakes? Take your left hand to your nose. This is the first exercise in the morning. Left hand to your nose, right hand across, left earlobe. This is position 1. Move to position 2. Right hand on nose, left hand across, right eyelid. Don't worry, I'm the only one on camera. This is just bizarre. Now you've had training. I want you to stay with me on count. Are you ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. You know, I suggest you stay in the jobs you have. I'm actually concerned with those of you who kept up with me. It proves you do it frequently, which is a very bad sign. You see, with 5 minutes of practice, you could do that anytime you wanted. I know it has limited value. But if you've ever had somebody in your office you couldn't get rid of, I'll tell you how. You just start doing that, they think you're a serial killer. They leave, you know? I mean, there's just no hope. Every time you challenge people to do things differently, remember, most people today are into simplicity. Most people don't want to change anything. And they'll tell you one thing, but they won't do it unless you build a system that allows you to continue to learn, continue to make it part. We are in a process where the more skills I have, the more marketable I am. I had a woman tell me, she says, I know that's true, but it means I got to go back to school. And I said, well, one night a week. You know, I know you're working, you're a single parent, one night. And she said, oh, by the time I get the degree I want, I'll probably be 42. I had already passed that milestone, and she had implied that was old. And I asked her, how old are you? She said, 23. I said, look, how long have you been thinking about this? And she said, well, about 3 years. I said, you could have been 42. I mean, get on with it. We got to tell people, get on with it, continue to learn, continue to focus. You're going to hear that. Persevere and reframe difficulties and downturns as strategic opportunities. Don't look back. Once you embark on a new venture, put all your focus on the future. Second guessing only slows you down. Celebrate your setbacks, or at very least learn from them. If you don't analyze what went wrong and what you do differently, then you repeat the same mistake. Lose like a winner. Failing doesn't mean that you're a failure. It's in business as well as in life. The only unforgivable sin is never trying in the first place. So our goal is, once I realize that every time I overcome obstacles and I go through this, the more likely it is that I will be effective. I train myself that I am optimistic in the midst of what I do and I face every day with, hey, I got choices. Will I always win? No, of course not. Winners lose more than losers because they play the game more. They win and lose more frequently. They stay in the game. Excellence isn't a sometime thing. You have to earn it and re-earn it every single day. Now, a couple thoughts about relationships and network in the final couple minutes I have. Network with other optimistic people. How many of you just realize the people you spend time with has a lot to do with how you build your own repertoire, your own ability to stay and handle the problems. Keep away from people who try to belittle your ambition. Small people always do that, but the really great make you feel that you too can become great. Are you an encourager? Are we encouraging our clients? Sometimes they're coming to us for just a sense. They'd like to have a band. They'd like to have somebody who is one of their experts give them the encouragement you can do it. I remember when my accountant said to me, you've made it. In my small business, I was worried that I'd made it. You know, he says, no, I'm looking at the numbers and where you are, you've made it. You're now in a place where you have sustainability, you have your client base that you're working on. I needed that. This is fine as far as it goes. From here on, it's who you know. Network, that's one of the opportunities we have here. Get out of your comfort zone this morning. When you take a break, talk with people you don't know. Most of us spend time with people we do know. We come into a meeting like this and go, oh, there you are. We sit with the people we know. They're used people. You already know them. Part of what makes a county, a place effective is the network we build of getting out of our comfort zone and meeting different people and being involved with it. Optimists are comfortable expanding their network. And that's the beautiful. Edward Bales, we teach collaborative problem solving at school. That's called cheating. I don't care where the idea comes from, right? Wherever it comes from. I'm willing to give more than I share the credit to other people because that's what I want to build on. Every person I know knows something better than I. My job is to listen long enough to find it and use it. This was my first manager. Stanford Linear Accelerator, Palo Alto, California. I helped build the mile-long electron microscope they have at Stanford. My title was a lab technician. I drove a truck. I don't know why they called me a lab technician, but now I'm sure it was for funding purposes. He had on his wall this statement every single week. He took a walk with me, and here's the question he asked. He asked, Terry, you've been here a week now. What's working for you? How many of you agree we spend far too much time talking about the problems, not enough time talking about what's working? One of the things I'd like you to focus on as you spend time here, sure, be listening to what I say, Bill says, Mark. Listen to each other. And instead of focusing on where the problems are, let's ask people, what's worked for you this year? What one thing have you done that made it more likely that you have been successful contributing to the goals that you have? Because ultimately, this county rises on the basis of what we all collectively do together. And I want more successful people. I don't need, it isn't a limited pie. The job is how do we expand that and bring more people along. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it's a good start to keep us in mind that it's individuals who make a difference and you are the people that make the difference. Thank you very much for letting me.